Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel and I make videos about hand sewing and English paper piecing. So if that's something that you're interested in, do check out my other videos. Today I will be sharing with you some more information about the temperature quilt, which is a make along that I'll be starting on January the 1st of 2024. I'm going to show you the fabrics that I've purchased. I'm going to give you a little demonstration of the block that I'll be doing. I'm going to talk about the layout of my quilt and also some FAQs that have been mentioned in the Facebook group that we've got. If you would like to support the channel, please consider subscribing and liking this video because that really helps YouTube push it out to other people who might be interested. So I have got all of my fabrics I've purchased here. You might have saw in last week's video that me and my sister went to the Bramble Patch, which is about an hour's journey for us. It's in a small village called Weedon, but they do sell online and it's an amazing shop. And I bought mainly Liberty quilting cottons and lots of different colours. My coolest temperature is purple, and then it goes into blues, greens, yellowies, and pinks are my hottest temperatures. So this is my pinks. I should have done it the way round, that pink would be more common in the quilt, with pink being my favourite colours, but I did want pink. I felt pink and, you know, the fuchsia reds are a really nice hot colour. I wanted, when you looked at the quilt, it to reflect a temperature quilt as best as I can, but still keeping my fabrics that I like in mind. So when I went to purchase my fabrics, I planned out what colours would go with each temperature beforehand, and I also planned out how much I would need of each fabric. I did discuss that in the last video, but here's a little clip of the chart that I took with me to the shop and how much I purchased next to each colour. But with it being Liberty quilting cotton for the most part, I am hoping that I'll just be able to top up and purchase more if necessary. Now, when I first started thinking about the temperature quilt, I knew that I wanted to do a square block for my lowest temperature and then an applique circle on top for the highest temperature of the day. But then when I first mentioned the temperature quilt, one of you guys said, do a heart instead of a circle. And I was like, yes, I've always wanted to do that style of quilt where it's the square with the heart. And I was like, yes, I should do that. But now that I've bought my fabric, I was a bit worried that my fabric is a bit too fussy and that the two fabrics laid over the top of each other might not have as much impact as if you had just plain fabrics or batiks. So you do need to consider that when purchasing your fabrics. The prints, is it going to be providing enough contrast? So that's what I thought, and now I'm thinking that perhaps a heart is a bit too fussy, whereas a circle will be more striking. So I have opted to go for a square with a circle. That was my original plan. There's a lovely lady that I follow on Instagram. I think her name's, there's a ladybird on my wall up there, keep looking at it. There's a lovely lady on Instagram called Helen Phillips, and she does amazing heart quilts that I really like, applique, and she does it with a low volume background. So I think I'll just have that as, you know, a dream quilt that I want to make in the future. When I also spoke about the temperature quilt, so the temperature quilt's evolving and it's going through a design change. I also said that I wanted to do 31 days down, 12 months across, because I'd seen a really nice inspiration photo. I'll insert that for you. But then when I thought about it, I actually realised that those are flying geese, so they're twice as wide as they are long. So if I just did mine in squares, which are going to be 4-inch squares, it would be disproportionately long because the example is with rectangles that are widthways. So I have decided not to do that as well. And the layout that I have gone for is 17 squares across and 22 down, and that will give me overall 374 squares. obviously I need 365, so there's some blank squares at the end where I'm going to put my initials and the year appliqued on with hand applique, and I'll probably just do those, the background of those squares, in a similar colour to what we finish off on the 31st of December, just to keep it in together. I have put together this little layout that I've done just so I could check that yes, this layout does actually work, and I think it's a nice proportion of a quilt rather than 31 by 12, which would be really long and skinny. Unless, of course, if you wanted to. I think I saw someone on the Facebook group said that they was going to do a row of white in between, so they would have 24 rows by 31 down, which I think is quite nice and proportionate as well. Now, I did mention it in the other videos where we discussed the temperature quilt, but the type of quilt that you make, your design, your shape, anything like that, totally up to you. This is just where we can come together and make it. There's no instructions on you must do this and you must do that. Totally flexible to what you want to do, because I know lots of people have different styles and designs. I know a lot of people will be doing this as their first time quilt or their first time English paper piecing, so we'll try and do some tutorials in the coming weeks on those as well. But my tutorial today, or more like just a sew along, will be on needle turn applique. So these are my two fabrics that I chose to use as an example. This is 6 to 8 degrees and this is 18 to 20. And I thought I'd do this because that might be a temperature that comes up in the spring or early summer, and I will be able to reuse this block. But I also felt like these fabrics were the most fussy fabrics. So what I did first was I tried to decide what size block I wanted. This is a 3-inch square and this is a 4-inch square, and I think I like my finish size as 4-inch, so I've cut my fabric. Oh, it doesn't look like I have, but I have. 1/4 inch either side, so it's 4.5 by 4.5, because when I sew this together I'll use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, whereas I felt that the 3 might be too small. Obviously I'll use more fabric though doing the 4.5, so that's something that you need to take into consideration really. And then my circle, I just went around my house and I found something that looks good, sort of proportionate sizes. This is just a piece of waste cardboard. I put a cup on there and I thought, yeah, that's the type of proportion that I'm looking for. I might make an actual template out of that rather than having to use the cup every time. So what I'll do is I'm just going to do some needle turn applique, and we'll talk about the FAQs as well. So what I've done here is I've used the heat erasable pen, which I know is very controversial. Lots of people have said to me on Instagram that it comes back and things like that. So I'll probably, when I come to do the quilt, I'll probably use a water erasable pen. So I'm just using some applique pins just to stick all that down. So my first one of the questions that was asked was sort of, what do you need to do to prepare? Well, I would do exactly this, just to make sure before you commit to the whole quilt, do you like the design? So whether you're doing hexagons, and especially if it's your first time doing that technique, have a little practice. So if you're doing hexagons, sew a few hexagons together, or if it's 1/2 inch hexagons, sew those together as well, just so you know that you actually like the design that you're doing. Because if you don't like the design that you're doing and you don't know that until you've actually started, well, you know, you want to practice and make sure that you like the design that you're doing. So that would be the first thing that I would say. Once you bought your fabrics, have a little go, and even if it is just doing something on cardboard so you can see, do you like the size of what you're making? And then in terms of preparation, so you've bought your fabrics. I am going to very soon is divide my fabrics into Ziploc bags, just so I know that I've got everything and it's in the, I've got the temperatures labelled, so that when it comes to January I'm going to know that this is the fabric and I've got it all in the right order. I would also look at thinking about, do you want to pre-cut any of your fabric ahead of time? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my squares. So if I do decide on the 4.5-inch squares, I'll probably cut half of the fabrics into those squares so that I've got those ready. Again, put them into labelled bags just so I can make sure that they all stay accurate. And then I'm ready to go then. If I don't decide to cut, I might not decide to cut, you know, the summer temperatures, but I'll certainly decide to start with the January type of temperatures. So that then I know that on January 1st, I'm ready to go pretty much. If you like the cutting process, you know, by all means you could cut some every day, or you could do weekly cutting, but for me the cutting is my least favourite part of the quilt, so I'm going to do that as in manageable pieces as I can. So I might just do a couple of months worth, maybe do the winter temperatures and get all of those out of the way. And I am going to buy maybe a nice box that I can store everything in, just so that everything's got a home and it's all ready to go, because this is going to be something that you'll need to do you know, regularly, whether it's every day, every other day, or if you're going to catch up once a week. It is going to be something that you need to have readily available to access. So I would say get yourself a nice box, whether it's one of those really nice plastic storage boxes, or I was looking at a nice decorative box. I usually like to put my projects in, you know, like the nice gift boxes that you get, the quite large ones. I like to put my projects in those. I was looking at the Liberty suitcases because one of my followers on Instagram mentioned them, but I just can't stretch. So I might get something that's inspired by that type of thing. So all I'm doing here is, with my needle, is I'm just pushing the seam allowance underneath and then stitching along the line that I've drawn there. And most of my work, or most of my stitches, are only going to be visible from the back. So there you go, you can see that the stitches are there on the back, and it leaves a really nice clean edge on the front. So in terms of making it easier to stick to a daily practice of sewing, because it might only be 20 minutes of sewing that you need to do to complete your block for that day, but you want to make it as easy as possible for you to do that, I would, in your box that you prepare of all your pre-cut fabrics, your pattern there, you also want your needle, thread, scissors, and anything else that you like to have on hand in order to do your sewing. Someone asked on the Facebook group about pre-washing fabric. Obviously, very controversial question, and it really is down to personal preference. I think that pre-washing your fabrics really belong to garment making. Obviously, if you're going to make a garment, you need to pre-wash the fabric, but for quilting, if some of it shrinks, you're only going to get a really nice wrinkled antique effect looking quilt. I don't think it matters too much. As long as you're using good quality fabric, you shouldn't have much fabric bleeding, and you can always use plenty of colour catchers when you wash your quilt when it's done. But I wouldn't pre-wash, especially if you bought pre-cuts. This particular question said that they had bought pre-cut jelly rolls and things like that, little charm packs. There's no point in washing those because you will lose so much of it to fraying and everything like that. I wouldn't, and I don't. I've never pre-washed any material for my quilts, but that's mainly because I don't mind. Stitched through my finger. That's mainly because I don't mind. I don't know if I'm out of focus there. I don't mind if materials do shrink, and yeah, it's just one of those things. They'll all shrink together if they do shrink. It's not something that concerns me, but I do know it is a controversial question and I've probably given a controversial answer, so I'm sorry about that. There was also a question about the makeup of the fabric that you use, whether 100% cotton is best. I do think that 100% cotton is best for when it comes to making quilts, just because then it responds so much better to being pressed, so much less stretch in the fabric. Probably less likely to shrink if you're using 100% cotton, or is it more likely? I don't know, I don't concern myself. But yes, I think 100% cotton is best for making your quilt. Some people in the Facebook group also mentioned templates and for cutting your fabric. Now, I think that if you're going to use something like a hexagon quilt, you don't necessarily need to buy a hexagon template, because you don't need to cut hexagons with a template. I don't personally think. I think it's far easier just to cut with a ruler straight up the amount that you need, and then just trim it into a rough hexagon shape. When I'm doing English paper piecing, I don't worry about making sure that my seam allowance is neat. I just cut it with a pair of scissors, and I just rough eyeball it somewhere in between 1/4 of an inch and 1/2 an inch, depending on how much fabric I've got available. If you prefer a template, then yeah, you can by all means purchase a template, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. If you're doing a shape that's a little bit more complicated, like let's say for example you was going to do a circle or a heart, you can buy a template for that, because then you can cut with it and you can draw with it and it'll be accurate every time. But what I'll do is make my own template using the cup and something called, I think it's called plastic template, and all you do is you cut it at home and then you can draw around the item every time. But as you saw here in the footage, I wasn't concerned with keeping my edge neat, because it's all going to be hidden inside my needle turn applique. As long as I'm leaving adequate amount of seam, I don't think it will matter too much. And again, if you might have watched my previous video, I did show you the fabric that my sister has purchased, and she's decided to go with a quilt as you go method. So she is doing, I think it might be 3-inch squares. So she's got a template from Daisy and Grace. Again, that's one of those things where I think a template is very handy, because that will help her cut her fabric the same every time. And she's going to do the inside square of the quilt as you go as, I think, the high temperature, and then the outside and the fabric that wraps around the front as the night temperature. So it's a really good way of doing it, and the main advantage for doing the quilt as you go is that come the end of the year, everyone else will have just done the quilt top, but you will have done the quilt top and the wadding, so your quilt will be finished at the end of the year. So I think that is a really good way of doing it. A lot of people in the original video that I put up left comments to say that they was going to do quilt as you go hexagons, which I think is brilliant. The only consideration that you need to take into account is that whilst yes, your quilt top will be finished at the end of the year, when you buy your fabric you've got to buy more, because you're essentially buying the backing as well. So obviously your piece that wraps around is a bigger piece of fabric, so you'll go through your fabric more than, let's say, a normal hexagon quilt, and you'll need to purchase your wadding and the backing fabric. So when we was at the fabric shop with my sister, she is on the understanding that she needs to buy more wadding as she goes along, and probably more of the fabric, because she'll probably go through it a little bit faster, but that's absolutely fine and she knows that. Just something you need to keep in mind, that you'll have more of an expensive initial cost if you decide to go with the quilt as you go method, but it will be all finished at the end of the year, providing you keep up to date with your temperatures. And yeah, I think that's a really good way to go. If it's your first time quilting or first time doing a large project, just do a practice piece like I'm doing. Pick a temperature that you know will probably come up again, so that that block isn't actually to waste, and have a go at it. If you're only doing a hexagons every day and you're going to join them into hexagon flowers, just make up a hexagon flower, even if it's just for another project rather than cutting into your temperature quilt fabrics. I'm coming to the end here of mine, and I do actually like the colours together. I think it does provide a good bit of contrast. You can see the circle. That's what I was worried about. I thought, are you going to be able to see the circle? And these fabrics here, I tried to pick the ones that would most clash, because I did put some semi-planes in, or what do you call them, like blending fabrics. I did put some of those in so that it wasn't too overall busy. Even though I do like busy, I think. I like busy with these little dainty prints. That's what I really love about Liberty. The fabrics are gorgeous, aren't they? So I think I am pretty set now on choosing to go with a circle rather than a heart. And I'm happy with the layout of doing the 17 by 22, was it? However many it was that I said earlier in the video. If you have any questions at all, just leave them down in the description, down in the comments of this video, or send me a message on Instagram. If it's something that I think other people might be questioning, I'll do a response in a video for you. Or if it's something that's just tailored to your personal situation, I'll just reply with a message. Also, let me know if you're going to do this block with the circle. The way that you can then join these blocks, you can either join them on the sewing machine or you can hand piece them together, which is what I'll be doing. Everything on my quilt will be hand sewn. And I prefer needle turn applique than, you know, the alternatives where you're using, what is it, heat and bond? What do you think? I like that it looks a little bit raised as well. I'll iron it down and I'll show you as well at the end of the video. Right then, so I think I've covered everything that I wanted to in today's video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope that you found it informative, because I know there's quite a few people asking questions about, you know, what they need to do, but really it's just about finding a quilt pattern that you like, finding a shape that you like or a technique, purchasing the fabric, and then doing a little bit of prep, whether that's cutting, ironing, preparing the pieces for whatever you need to do for the quilt that you're making. It's quite difficult for me to say you need to do X, Y and Z because there's so many different quilts that people are making, but most importantly I want everyone to have fun and really enjoy the process. It's going to be such a good make along, and if you haven't already, do join the Facebook group. I think there's close to 150 of us in there now, and everyone's sharing pictures of the fabrics that they've purchased, which is so exciting. It's like going fabric shopping with a whole bunch of friends. Like I say though, if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with me, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. You take care and happy crafting. Bye.